And Right, so greetings to everyone. This is our June meeting for the World Intellectual Forum. And we're gathered from different parts of the world. I'm hosting it based here in France. I'm the European coordinator for this body. We have different people come each time. We've been having these monthly meetings on the 30th of each month. So the World Intellectual Forum is a relatively new body set up in 2017 in the south of India. I went to a conference that launched it in Hyderabad and Chennai. It was a bunch of Indian intellectuals, but also from Russia, from America, from Europe. We all came together. We felt that it's time intellectuals sort of stood up and were counted, particularly on the peace issue. And I know there are many peace organizations, peace groups. I've been involved with Philosophers for Peace for many years. I'm vice president, but you know, it's a rarefied thing, philosophers. We appeal to a small elite. We wanted a much bigger movement to appeal to broadly academics, intellectuals, including writers, poets, you know, define an intellectual. Every culture's got a different thing. In Colombia, it might be a shaman who talks to the spirits of the ancestors. That's each culture defines an intellectual differently. In Islam, it might be a Shia or an Ismaili or a Sufi. You know, it's people who have who have intellect. Okay, define that again. That's a Latin term. I was fascinated once. I went to the Vatican Library and discovered a book in the secret section of the library. Not many people seem to go in, by Abelard, who founded the University of Paris. He's an intellectual I greatly respect. And he used the verb to intellect as a verb, intellecting. He wrote about this whole book called, you know, on intellecting. And basically he meant by thinking deeply. It means joining up concepts, joining up ideas. So the World Intellectual Forum, we exist to do that, to join up issues of human rights with spiritual freedom, freedom of thought, academic freedom, peace issues, non-violence, global warming, climate change, runaway technology, artificial intelligence, you know, all the kinds of problems that people are looking at piecemeal. And one of the problems with the academic system is it looks at things in a divided way. You know, you have a particular discipline. You look at things through a lens of anthropology, sociology, economics, whatever. Ours is a broad forum to appeal to specialists in all the knowledge fields. And so we've you know, our aim is really an educational one. And therefore the other body that really we are working with is teachers, academics, scholars. You know, this is how are we going to put our thinking caps on? I'm wearing a Sufi thinking cap I bought in Turkey. This helps me think. Okay, so that's enough from me. Welcome to everyone that's here. Let's just quickly have a little go round. Sean, I think you're next on my screen. Just introduce yourself and then pass on to the next person, and we'll come back for your talk.
Sure. My name is Sean Connor. I come from the United States originally, from the East Coast of the US. I currently live in Berlin, in Germany, working for the International Peace Bureau, which is a Nobel Peace Laureate back from 1910 organization. Yeah, I guess that's a basic bio.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. We'll come to your talk shortly. Shreya, do introduce yourself.
Hi, Namaste. My name is Shreya. I'm from Bangalore in southern India. I was first introduced to restorative practices through my interaction with the Creative Response to Conflict, CRC. I am a fourth-year law student and I just finished my bachelor's in forensic psychology. That is my educational background. Thank you.
Right, Shreya, welcome. And we sit together on an international forum for restorative justice run by Priscilla Prutzman, who has been long active in non-violence work, education, a friend of Dr. S.L. Gandhi. And Shreya has, you know, her finger on the button of legal aspects. And hopefully we'll hear from her later. How come she got into forensic psychology? That must be a whole other story. Right, Kacheni, welcome. Introduce yourself.
Hello everyone, my name is Katyayani Singh. I am an assistant professor at Jagran Lake City University, Bhopal in political science.
Welcome. And we're hoping to hear from Kacheni a bit later about her wonderful conference. I think it took place yesterday in honor of Glenn Page. And she runs a Center for Non-Killing, which is, an important initiative. We'll hear from her shortly. Berkan, I think it's your turn. Do introduce yourself. Welcome. Where are you?
I am currently in Turkey, and actually my name is pronounced Bircan, not Birkan or Berkan. Can, like Jane, the sound is J is there. So I am founder and president of the Late Millennium Organization, and I was honored and privileged to be one of the speakers, including keynote speakers of the specific session during the 7th International Conference on Nonviolent Action, where we met in Jaipur 2008. And then we met recently, the last one was December 2019. And my organization is associated with the United Nations Department of Public Information. Actually, also ANURAD has been associated with the same department. And recently, I've been elected to the Global NGO Executive Committee, which is representing the NGOs associated to the Department of Global Communications. But my works mainly center with and around Late Millennium and peace and nonviolence. And I'm honored part of the conferences, ANURAD, and also I'm most honored and privileged that Dr. Gandhi appointed me as the Goodwill Ambassador of ANURAD organization to the UN. So our work scope is a little wider because we are a cultural media organization, and now we also broaden our missions to become as also rights and service-based organizations. So we are in a transition process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Berkan. We'll hear from you later. I'm sure you can tell us about what you're doing. Great.
Thanks.
I think it's Vidya Jain next. Yes.
So hello everyone and namaskar. I am Vidya Jain. I am professor of political science by training, and my major area of interest in research and work have been peace, non-violence, Gandhian issues, and gender issues as well. And we have shared several platforms. Thomas Daffron and me. He comes very regularly to Jaipur, and we have worked together very closely in of the peace conferences as well as the ANURAD movement. Yeah. And recently I'm very much interested in non-killing. We just 2 days back we celebrated Glenn Pay's birth anniversary, and I think that this concept of non-killing is coming up like anything. So I'm so happy to be associated with this World Intellectual Group, and let us see if we can work together in future.
Great, thank you, Vidya. Well done. Okay, Kanu, are you there with us? Just introduce yourself. Hello.
Yeah, hello, Professor Thomas. Thank you very much. Yeah, hello, everyone. I'm Kanu Megha, and I'm by my education, I am PhD in medical biochemistry, and I'm working as an assistant professor in Dubai. I'm basically from India, and my areas of specialization are in neuroscience, basically. So I have studied neuroscience on different areas like the Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease, the neurodegenerative diseases, and I'm associated with World Intellectual Forum for quite, for a few months, and it's my honor that I have presented quite a few times on various topics like the neuroscience part of the Sanskrit language, and the beauty of the language and the importance of the language associated with the different changes in the brain, how it helps in associating with the different improvements in the brain when the Sanskrit is chanted regularly. And I have also spoken on the peace and conflict resolution in association with neuroscience. And like several other topics I have associated, like neuroscience of love, neuroscience during the conflict, the situation. And so I'm involved in such areas when I'm associated with World Intellectual Forum.
Yeah, greetings. Can't see you, Kanu. Your camera doesn't seem to be working. Is it
Yes, it is. It's not working. It has some problem with the, settings. I will just look into the settings and I will just try to fix it.
You can see your picture anyway. That's
Yes. Thank you, Professor Thomas.
Anyway, nice to see you again from Dubai. So we're quite broadly spread. We have Turkey, Germany, Dubai, India, etc. Right. I think everyone said hello now. Oh, Dr. Mishra joining us from India. Would you like to unmute and introduce yourself, please?
Hello.
Yes, greetings. We can't see you.
To all of you. I am Dr. KP Mishra from Mumbai, India. Can you hear me?
We can hear you fine. The camera's not working, but that's not so important.
Okay. So, okay. So camera is on.
Okay, well,
Dr. KP Mishra from Mumbai. I was a nuclear scientist in Bhabha Atomic Research Center for 40 years, and I'm now retired, but continue my academic interest in Mumbai University. My major interest is to see how can be reduced, violence can be avoided, peace can be established. Academic interest in these areas of peace, violence, and environmental issues. I quite enjoy your talk, and
it might be better to not have the camera on, Dr.
can you hear me?
We can't hear you very well, so I think turn the camera off. Your instinct initially was...
Now?
Yeah, I'm saying probably...
Now you can see?
We can see you fine, but the sound is very poor quality. But I think we...
Okay.
Fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Dr.
Yeah.
has been a nuclear scientist for many years and has also been on the board of the Ladnan Jain University, which does a master's.
Yes, I continue to be emeritus professor in Jain University.
Excellent, excellent. And you knew, presumably you knew the founders of the university, Acharya Tulsi and Mahapragya, yeah? The Jain.
Yeah, Mahapragya was the one who initiated my interest in Jainism.
Good. Okay, right. Well, thank you. I think everyone's introduced themselves. There's a few others joining us. Somebody from Canada who might come a bit later. Let's go back to Sean Connor. Sean is going to tell us about the work of the International Peace Bureau. And indirectly, that's how I got to be involved with the World Intellectual Forum through Ingeborg Brenesch, who is a vice president of the International Peace Bureau. And, you know, there's but it's been the largest international network of peace organizations. My Philosophers for Peace is a member, and I think the World Intellectual Forum is or ought to be. And they're planning a big conference. So Sean's going to tell us all about it. Over to you, sir.
Sure. Thank you very much for this opportunity to come and share a little bit. Unfortunately, I do have to say Ingeborg is no longer directly involved in IPB as a board member, just because we do have term limits, and unfortunately her term limit came to an end, but she is still indirectly involved with IPB and will be forming part of the Congress as well, leading a workshop on a culture for peace. So for those of you who aren't familiar with IPB or the International Peace Bureau, we are, as Thomas said, the world's largest network of international peace organizations, as well as national affiliates and local affiliates as well. We're also the oldest network, being founded in 1891, coming up on our 130th year anniversary this year as an organization. IPB has focused for most of its history on issues of disarmament, on issues of reinvestment of that money into social causes, and for preferring dialogue and conversation over confrontational policies. In recent years, we have been expanding. I think many of you mentioned as well in your own organizations, this kind of looking beyond simple issues of war and peace into social factors, into climate change, human rights, gender issues, and plenty more. And IPB also has really taken a big focus into looking at the larger picture of peace beyond war and disarmament. And that will be one of our main focuses of this upcoming Congress, is how the peace movement, the historical peace movement, is tied, and how we can continue to improve ties with other social movements that we've really seen growing over the past 30, 40 years, but even more so in the past 10, 15 years. So the Congress is under the title Reimagine Our World, Action for Peace and Justice. And this component of justice is, of course, one of the main important components of the Congress. It will take place from October 15th to 17th of this year in the city of Barcelona. However, it is not just an in-person event, but it is a hybrid in-person digital event. So we really want to make sure that those who are unable to travel to Barcelona, as we know, unfortunately, between the COVID crisis and some other issues of many people from around the world being unable to easily enter the European Union, we want to make sure that this event is accessible to a much larger audience so that we can really connect with those from all around the world, share experiences, and not limit it to a European or a quote unquote Western event. So we really are hoping for vast participation throughout the global South, throughout Africa, Asia, Latin America, all different parts of the world, and bringing them together to meet one another, to share issues as well as the work that are being done by their organizations, and to develop common solutions and common actions of how we can move forward to ensure globally that we can work efficiently and effectively toward peace, disarmament, and justice, towards the environment, towards women's rights, towards human rights, towards workers' rights, and basically every issue that can be offered up. So it's a very diverse Congress in the themes that will be mentioned. We have some bigger name speakers who will be joining, as well as some lesser known names who are still doing wonderful work around the world. We've also made a promise that at least 40% of all speakers in the plenary sessions, as well as the workshop sessions, will come from youth. So we aren't just having older voices, but also involving many young voices in the conversation throughout the entire Congress format. The basic outline or schedule of the event, we'll have on Friday evening European time, a plenary session that will feature voices such as Lula of Brazil. It will feature Jeremy Corbyn of the UK. We also have Vandana Shiva of India, and plenty of other voices. I won't give away all the names, so you have a reason to look and share more. Then on Saturday, we will have another plenary session, as well as 2 workshop sessions throughout the day at various times. And then on Sunday, we will have 1 final workshop session, a roundtable event, and then closing ceremony. Seeing again that around the world, some of the events that will take place, it will be nighttime in some countries or early morning in other countries. We do hope to record as many sessions as possible, so they will be able to be viewed afterwards. Registration is open and free for the event, so it is not necessary to pay anything to be able to attend, either virtually or in person. I will post the link to the event in the chat as well, so you can look at the program. Now, the program that we have on the website is not the final program. We are making some updates, and we hope to publish an updated version within about 2 weeks or so now, maybe by the end of July at the very latest. And beyond that, you can find information about events that are happening prior to the Congress itself. You can learn more or get in contact with those who are directly involved in the Congress. And then once we open up the virtual platform, there's also the opportunity to design your profile, to share a little bit about your own work, and then to network and communicate with others through that platform. If you have any questions, you can contact me as well. I will put my email into the conversation. My name, again, is Sean Connor, and I am the coordinator for all international matters related to the Congress. So I'm happy to answer any questions and help out as needed.
Right, Sean, thank you very much for your little summary there. I'm sure there's some questions. So let me just start off. So I knew Colin Archer quite well, the Secretary General of IPB for many years. He organized some conferences. Is this the sort of next one in that sequence? This is the first one since he left, isn't it?
Yes, yep. So this is our second International or World Peace Congress that we're putting on. The first one was 5 years ago in Berlin.
Yeah, yeah. And will you be picking up some of the themes that were developed in Berlin?
Of course, yes, yes. We hope to really continue the conversation from there. You know, we've reviewed the documents that came out of that Congress, but really with this one, I guess one of the big differences is we noticed after the Berlin Congress, we had some great ideas, great actions, great experience, but you know, the conversation sort of changed or faded after the Congress. For this one, we're hoping now to take the results from both of these Congresses to really create plans of action for the future as well. So that after the Congress, it doesn't feel like, you know, the event is over, but really that we take it with us and we continue on an international level.
And just tell those that aren't maybe familiar with, I mean, who are your current Secretary General, presidents? Who sits on the board of the IPB now? Is there anyone from India, for instance?
We do have on our board, we have Beena Lakshmi Nepram, who is from the Manipur region of India. She's of indigenous background, and so she has sat and she will be playing a direct role in the Congress, both as a plenary speaker and a coordinator for a workshop. We also have on our council, which is part of our larger decision-making body, we have Balkrishna Kurvi is his name. I have to look up what the name of his organization is here. If you give me 1 second, I'll be able to find that.
Well, don't worry, we can look it up later. It's just, and who else is on the board from around the world? Just
yep. So our co-presidents at the moment, we have Philip Jennings, who is the leader, former leader of UNI, which is one of the world's largest global trade unions that networks those involved in the workers' rights and union movements from around the world. And then we have Lisa Clark, who is a peace activist from Italy, who has worked around the world, including in the Balkans region and in Colombia, developing peace processes with local organizations there. Our executive director is Rainer Braun, who is German. He's also a former president of IPB. And then on our board, we have members from Argentina, from Canada, from, let's see, takes a minute to think of them all, from Mongolia, from Japan, Philippines, let's see, where else?
what about Russia and China?
At the moment, unfortunately, we have no representatives in the board from China or Russia. This is one of our current efforts that we're working on. And of course, with the system of IPB, normally we have people first take the step to be a council member, part of the larger decision-making body, and then over time become board members. So we do currently have a council member who's from Russia. That's Oleg Bodrov is his name. And we have just recently developed our first contacts within China, within the peace movement. We will have a Chinese speaker participating by video at the World Peace Congress that's coming up. And his name is Tong Zhao.
Right, fascinating. Okay, thank you, Sean. Any other questions to Sean? It's a chance
John
to
have the question.
yeah, any other questions? Anyone that
You have to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Sean. It's great information and great questions, Thomas. I have maybe several questions. I will list wherever you want to pick up. First, membership requirements. Second, if International Peace Bureau is associated with ECOSOC or UN Department of Global Communications or both or neither. And if you are considering to link your Congress agenda with the Sustainable Development Goals, which is UN's development agenda for 2030. Further, since the UN has had actually 75th anniversary, and that they launch a global conversation, it is called Join the Global Conversation to Shape Our Future, because the title kind of remind me that reshaping our future. So what they did, they launched a global survey conversation and a set of questions, what we are not happy and how we imagine, how we like to imagine by 2045, which is going to be 100th anniversary of the UN. So if you have anything in line with the SDGs and that kind of, let's say, imagine the next 5 years, next 10 years, or next 25 years. So, and then because also these are very much in line what you are expressing. Also, I'm not sure if you're aware of it. I will share when the press release is available. There is already scheduled a high-level forum on culture of peace on September 7th that is going to be hosted by the President of the General Assembly of the United Nations, but it is also a collaborative effort with a group of NGOs at the UN. It is called the Global Movement for the Culture of Peace. Those group are the associated NGOs with the UN, which I am part of that. So these are my ideas, points to bring out. And especially going back to if you are associated with the UNDG, SDGs or the ECOSOC, I am certain that you will reflect these conference info to the UN. If not, maybe I may be a channel to that. So over to you.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you. If I miss answering any of the questions, please just remind me. I tried to keep notes of them all, but my head's still a little tired from the vaccine I got yesterday.
Oh, sorry about that.
So the first matter being membership. We are, of course, a network that has a membership process for organizations. We welcome anyone who works in issues of peace and justice, social issues, and we have a membership system basically where there's applications on our website, both for individual and organizational membership to IPB. We have recently revised our process slightly for membership, giving basically one extra step. So there's the application. Following the application, we will organize a meeting that involves the IPB board, not the entire board, but one or two members, along with a couple of our staff members in Berlin, just to have an introductory meeting to better understand each other as organizations and how we see the partnership moving forward. And then afterwards, we take that to the board meeting and the board members make the final decision on acceptance. But generally speaking, we are pretty open really to anyone who is working and dedicated to issues of peace.
Is it involved fee in that line?
Sorry?
Is it involved fee like for the membership?
So
too?
we do have membership fees. Membership fees are negotiable, as you know, we understand around the world, different organizations can only afford so much for membership. Really, the option is open, and it's a conversation between us and the membership organizations about what they can realistically give or not give to us.
For instance, don't you have like a basic, let's say, for the individual, for the organization, the basic, then maybe suggested up to this that?
Yes. So that you have all the details in one place. For organizations, for example, it's different if it's an international organization, national organization, or working more on a local level, as we also understand there's some differences with the size of organizations. Let's see.
I think carry on with the questions, Sean. Let's get through them. There were 5 questions. We won't go into all the details here.
So the next one with ECOSOC, IPB is a member, and we have membership status for that. To my knowledge, I've been working with IPB a little over a year. We haven't been too active with that in recent years, but I see that as something we will likely kind of bring to the forefront following the Congress as well here. But we do have that membership status there. We're also very active with a lot of the UN General Assembly meetings, organizing activities around there for those who are attending. And that also goes for treaties. Of course, the NPT, we always make sure to have events around the NPT conference, as well as now the TPNW that has entered into effect. So we do actively play a role in that. We also have a specific envoy to the UN, and I don't have the name at the top of my head right now.
Don't worry, we'll find out.
Yep. Then onto the SDGs. We do plan to link the Sustainable Development Goals directly to the Congress in a number of ways. We also do this through one of IPB's main campaigns for the moment, which is the Global Campaign on Military Spending, or every year we have the Global Days of Action on Military Spending. And the idea of these days really is that divestment from military interests, we need to then reinvest that money into the SDGs, and that is one of the central points that we drive home. Then going to the high-level forum on the culture of peace. Personally, I was unaware of that, though I wouldn't be too surprised if we have some IPB members who are connected to that in some way. We have, for example, directly involved in the Congress and a good contact of IPB's is Federico Mayor Zaragoza, who is the former Secretary General of UNESCO. And so he will also be participating directly in the Congress, likely in the workshop on the culture of peace. And we're also in contact with him about other events that he's involved with.
Right. Thank you very much, Sean. That was very good. And thanks for those questions, Berjan. Anyone else before we move on to our next speaker? Anyone else? Can I ask I mean, the IPB is like twice as old as the UN. I mean, you're the grandfather, grandmother of the world's peace movement. Yet you failed to stop World War I, and you failed to stop World War II. So what did you get wrong?
That's a question I think personally I cannot answer, being both new in the organization and one of the younger members of the organization. I think Colin Archer in particular has written a little bit about that, and we do have some of his kind of look backs on the past of IPB within our documents on our website. We also held a series of 2 webinars on the history of IPB last year that delved a little bit into the topic. It's a number of issues. I don't think any single one could be highlighted, but it's a complicated matter, let's say, and we're always looking to be more critical on our past and looking towards the future as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a trick question, really, a bit mean. I mean, one of the things I've thought about, because I did my whole studies on the history of peace and the history of peace research. And, what is the role of intellectuals? I mean, this is a serious question since you're addressing the World Intellectual Forum around peace. And why has it always been seen as a minority thing? In the 1920s and 30s, people like Romain Rolland in France, they were great peace intellectuals. There was Bertrand Russell after World War II, but it's always a minority. It's never become and it was seen as something of the left, which then, of course, the right demonizes and politicizes. So, I mean, it's a question to all of us on this forum: is how can we make peace something that is a mass concern for all humanity, whether we're official intellectuals or just thinking people? We're all Homo sapiens. Because if we don't, it seems to me that history, is not looking very good, is it, at the moment? And my final point is that you probably don't know this, the WIF has pioneered the idea of a cyber peace treaty. We think that warfare has now gone online, it's become an information war. and cyber warfare. And we actually wrote the first draft of a cyber peace treaty that was floated back in 2017, and it was picked up by Lavrov and Russia, who are now trying to promote this. Putin and Biden discussed it at their summit just now. I would love the IPB to take up that issue and campaign with it. Is it something you've thought of or are doing?
To some degree, yes. I mean, personally, yes. I can say from my aspect, yes. In terms of our central projects, one of the things we are really building up now is called Common Security 2022, which reflects on the common security policy of the 1980s that was developed by the committee that's colloquially known as the Olof Palme Committee, that brought European nations as well as both Russia or the USSR and the USA together at a table to discuss this idea that one country cannot be safe as long as the other is not safe, and that nuclear warfare is a loss for everyone. We're looking at this now and also looking at how we need to revise it for the 21st century. And of course, one of the most important sections is the online sphere and in the cybersphere as well as space. And so that will be a direct part of our conversation as we're putting together that project on common security. Also in the Congress, we do have workshops dedicated to cybersecurity and security in space. So these new technologies are definitely a central part of how we will think about peace in the future. I think it could be beneficial as well to have this beyond the common security conversation, but we do believe common security being the most essential step kind of to avoid big nation wars and from there develop a framework to resolve conflicts between countries which still will arise in kind of the less lethal space, so to speak.
Yeah. Right. Well, thank you very much, Sean. That was brilliant, and you kicked us off very well. So let's, let this be the beginning of a conversation between us and say hello to all, the people involved. Right. Let's move on and hear from perhaps.
I have a question to you, Dr. Thomas.
Go for it.
I haven't seen, maybe we have, do we have a Facebook or any form of social media for the World Intellectual Forum?
Yes.
Really? Because I haven't, I'm not aware of it. The reason I ask, because maybe we can connect what Shans is saying, World Intellectual Forum, and each of us who are on the executive board on the World Intellectual Forum. So this could be, we can disseminate through being aware instantly to our own network.
No, you're welcome. If you just Google on Facebook, World Intellectual Forum, there's this dedicated group.
Okay, because I haven't, maybe I missed it for some reason, if you inform me about it.
Yeah, thank you, Berjan.
Okay, thank you.
Right, okay. Can we move on to Katyeni? She's been organizing this meeting yesterday, which I'm hoping you can summarize what you discovered and tell us about your Center for Non-Killing Studies and so on. And what was the conference yesterday all about, Katyeni?
Okay, so hello to everyone, greetings. 28th of June was celebrated as the birthday of Glendy Page. So in order to commemorate his memory, we decided to have all the researchers, all the academic scholars from across the world participate in this webinar. So we had speakers from Australia, from Canada, from Spain, from US, and a lot of speakers were there. So it was a bit challenging because there were time issues, time zone problems. However, the webinar went in well. So each of the speakers, they basically gave a description of what their contribution in the field of non-killing is. So we had different talks And even I gave one small presentation of mine, and I thought I would be sharing my bit in our presentation for today. So I had developed a non-killing index in order to measure the killings that are occurring across the world. I had developed this index for the first time in 2015. That is when I was pursuing my PhD in political science. And now I have come out with the second index of 2020 with more advanced and latest figures. So the major thing that we wanted to highlight was that how, despite all the different type of peace activists and peace philosophers theory going on all about, the forms or the intensity of killing has not decreased. We may have cut down the wars between the countries. We do not see wars like we used to see 50 to 60 years back. But that has not reduced the killings overall. The form has changed. Now there are ecocides, there are suicidal cases, there are homicidal cases taking place. Also, one very prominent person also had done a case study with reference to India, wherein he studied how honor killing is also one of the major problems in India. That is when couples are not allowed to marry according to their choice, and if they happen to marry, then the family members kill them in the name of honor, in the name of protecting the honor of the family. So that's also a problem which has not been addressed by even the national community. So these were the major highlights, and the most prominent thing about this non-killing index was there were important developed countries that were actually in the list of top 20 countries wherein killings were occurring with great intensity. There was Russia, there was USA, because USA is having the problem of gun culture, the homicidal deaths, and also capital punishment is there. Similar is the case with China. In China also, the capital punishment is actually very high. As per our report, as per what the Amnesty International has reported, around 1,000 people are executed every year. So that makes all that very complicated. I mean, for countries which are identified as developed countries, if they are facing such critical forms of killing, then it becomes very difficult to preach peace for the developing nations like or the poor nations like Africa, the developing countries like even India. So that was the major highlight. And of course, now the new form of killing, that is the coronavirus, was also highlighted, because we have all come to this agreement that this is actually a sort of biological warfare. And probably it may be also relating to some environmental issue. But as far as the finding goes, the virus has been described by the scientists as not a natural virus, but rather a virus which has been created in the labs. So this all were the issues that we had covered in our webinar. Over to you.
Gosh, okay. Thank you very much, Kacheni. That's a huge area. For those that aren't familiar with Glendy Page's work and this whole concept of non-killing, just explain why the term is being used and what you mean. Why don't you call it a non-violence? What's...
Okay, okay. See, Dr. Glenn was of the view that non-violence is a bit difficult to measure. Because non-violence stands for not hurting anyone by words, by actions, or by any of your deeds. So that becomes a very difficult thing to practice, because there are fights between people, there are some issues or some disagreements between the people. but that does not actually leads to a problem. The problem actually arises when there is actions which involves direct when there is an action which directly hurts the other person, mortally wounding the other person, or taking away their lives. So Glenn D. Page was of the view that non-killing is something which is measurable as well as achievable, which cannot be applied for non-violence, because we cannot assess the mind of the person, that what are they thinking? Are they thinking of any hurtful thoughts against any other person? So that's something Glenn D. Page advocated, that there has to be a step-by-step process. So if you want to achieve peace, the first basic step should be that you at least try to eliminate all form of killings. At least that should be explained to the people, that no matter what your ideology is, no matter what your belief is, it does not justify that you are going on to kill someone. After that, we can move on to the next step of non-violence, that is trying to control the thoughts of a person, that we should not be thinking of wrongs for something else. We should not be hurting someone by means of speech. So this was, you can say, this was a tool by which he decided to measure the peace of the society, because we are not, in order to achieve a goal, we first need to assess the problems which we are facing. So until and unless we do not study the forms of killing, until we do not do that, we will not be able to achieve the positive peace or the constructive peace in its true form. So that's why Glenn D. Page stated that first we start with non-killing. We start understanding how the idea of killing is inculcated in the minds of the people. And once we are able to do that, then it would be much easier to preach the philosophy of non-violence and peace. So that's how he came out with his philosophy.
Right. So that's a very clear summary. Thank you very much for that. Are there any questions to Kacheni about her Center for Non-Killing Studies in the middle of India, or about yesterday's conference, or any other points you want to raise?
I mean, what about the killing is, last and the final ultimate outcome of the violence, but what about in between, from the thought hurting? You can, when there is a bad action hurting physically, and also that might cause trauma, etc. But the physical action may involve whether minor or heavier degrees, but may not cause that. So then how are you gonna include those physical violence? It's visible, measurable, but didn't cause that.
Yeah.
Actually, the difference, what you are saying is, sometimes we may if I'm getting your question right, that you are asking that what about the physical traumas that a person may get out of the action of the other person? How do we measure that? Are you asking me that?
How you put in the non-killing scale of measuring, because it may not necessarily cause a death, but still it's measurable violence. It is different, much more different than thought. There is an action, someone got hurt, and we see every day, one form or another through news in any country. It may not end up with that, but it end up hospitalization, some physical hurt, etc. So how do you incorporate those violence in non-violence category in the larger picture?
Can I answer that, Kacheni?
Yes, sir, definitely.
Let me try first. I mean, the thing you need to know, Birjan, is that there are many other groups working on non-violence as such, which includes thought, word, and deed. I mean, I ran the School of Non-Violence with the Gandhi Foundation for like 10 years. It's still going. There's Gandhian non-violence groups. We had Vidya Jain. Hopefully she'll come back. So people do look at all those things. And of course, emotional pain, you know, you can imprison somebody and torture them. You won't kill them, but they're going to destroy their souls. All that's terrible. And of course, Kacheni and her group are all against all that. But what they've decided to do is just specially focus on the killing aspect. Let's stop that. Other groups look at the other. You know, my Institute of Peace Studies looks at the wider picture. But Glenn Page was, you know, he's an American social scientist. He'd been in the war in Korea. He'd witnessed killing firsthand. He made it his life's mission to stop killing. You know, let's stop that. Like in medicine, you know, obviously we're against cancer and diabetes and Alzheimer's, but doctors specialize in different things. You know, Glenn Page specialized in non-killing specifically, and I think he did, you know, it's important. Other people do the more general thing. Is that right, Kacheni? Is that fair, do you think?
Yes, exactly. That's just the difference.
Yeah. Okay. And I should just say, Kacheni and I are planning to teach a course together through her university on religions and non-killing. It's because religions have a bit of blood on their hands, you know, different religions theologically justify killing, or, you know, or some do, some don't. The Jains are scrupulous, no killing at all, no. And the Buddhists tend to be, you know, no killing. But there are other religions that say, yeah, but if it's our God, then let's kill, you know. So we're going to be highlighting a course on that, you know, which will be exciting, won't it? We'll be teaching that together. Okay, thank you very much, Kacheni. That was great. Let's move on to our next speaker, Shreya Shankar, who's joining us from Bangalore, city I know and love well. Shreya, tell us what your views are. Tell us what restorative justice is, and why is law important? Why are you training as a lawyer?
Absolutely. Like I said, my name is Shreya Shankar. I'm from Bangalore, southern India. Restorative justice is a really beautiful concept that allows you to look at justice in a slightly different way than you would in a legalistic context. Restorative, the word restorative essentially means to restore, right? So it allows for justice to restore both the traumatized party as well as the traumatizing party, or all other parties that are involved in society, to restore themselves both in terms of their economic, social, political, cultural wealth, but also in a very personal format. It allows individuals in each community to be able to restore peace, balance, and love, empathy, and compassion within their own bodies and metabolize the trauma that they've been through, which is what makes restorative justice unique. So the reason that I particularly got involved with restorative justice is because of my long-term association with law and with psychology. I am a fifth-year law student now in National Law School in India. And I just finished my bachelor's in forensic psychology. And through the course of my interaction with both these very interesting subjects that do have multiple opinions on how we should as a society think about justice, I realized that neither of these two fields in and of itself is enough to deal with the problems that we're facing in the world today. And before I move into why I think that, I'd like to give a little bit of characterization of the context that we're in. Just this week, we've had several strikes in the Tigray region of Ethiopia, Eritrea. We've had Lebanon's entire economy collapse. We've had European countries sign agreements with Lebanon to encourage their military. We've had issues in the Middle East. We've had issues in Syria, Iraq. We've had issues in Crimea. We've had UK defense papers be left unattended at a bus stop. We've had that entire leak. We've had a building collapse in Miami in Florida. We've had children be brutalized in different parts of the world by caregivers, by parents, by strangers. And all of the things that I'm mentioning have happened in the span of the last 7 days. The space at which violence, death, destruction is moving in our society is more than what we all expect it to be, and more than what we all realize. Because at the end of the day, we all consume parts of media. We all consume different things that we interact with in our social networks. And because of that, the amount of problematic relationships and problematic structures that is in fact present in our world is often mitigated in a way. I think it just really ties back to the concept of an echo chamber. We tend to listen to, hear, see things that we already know about or that support our opinions that have already been formulated, because that is the kind of association we create for ourselves. And when I think about it like this, I realize that laws alone aren't sufficient to guarantee people their basic rights or guarantee human existence and the right to exist with dignity. Just to give you an example, the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, the Iipsgp, which consolidates the most important civil political rights, the rights of the West, is generally what we characterize this convention as. It has a three-pronged structure for the establishment of each of its rights, and none of this changes across any of the rights, right? So whether I take the right to freedom of expression and speech, or I take the right to life, or I take the right to self-determination, I still have the same mechanistic, minimalistic, three-pronged approach that sort of repeats itself. And when you do look at jurisprudence of the Iipsgp or in the Human Rights Commission or in the European Commission of Human Rights or in the African Commission of Human Rights or even the Inter-American Court of Justice, we find that most of the definitions, most of the interpretations are very mechanistic, very based off of each other. Often they don't really recognize the real-time, real-world scenarios that do plague the world, right? That is the result of these mechanistic definitions itself at some level. And a lot of the time, the laws in countries, and I can speak from experience for India, itself have discriminatory aspects, have problematic aspects, sometimes are prejudiced towards women, sometimes are prejudiced towards the LGBTQ plus community, sometimes are prejudiced towards lower castes. And I do realize that this is the case throughout the world, despite different countries having differing interpretations of it. So law itself, I think, is insufficient to really bring about a form of justice such that the world is at peace. And I realize as I say this, that that's a very vague sentence. The world being at peace is not really the most definable concept. But if we were to define it as a lack of the denial of basic human needs to everyone, then I think we would come to the conclusion that law as an entity is not the only tool that we need in our toolkit to get to that point. And that is what led me to sort of study psychology and think about whether, especially with prison communities and with incarcerated folks, whether rehabilitation through psychology is an option. Now, while I think something to recognize at this point is that a lot of the time, we don't have access to psychology in prisons. We don't have access to therapists. And even if we do, we don't have access to good therapists who are trained in that specific field. We do know from research today that a lot of the time therapy in prisons don't show the results that you expect it to show. The reasons are several, but the most important reason is that psychotherapy today is focused around research that has happened with white middle class communities. And we're trying to transliterate the research that has happened in white middle class communities to other communities, Indian communities, for example, in Indian prisons, or even in the West, Mexican people who might be in prison, or Hispanics, Latinos, people of African American origin, people of Asian origin, etc. Right? So this transliteration often doesn't work. The cognitions, the beliefs that the original norm of research was based on doesn't extrapolate into the new situation where the community norms are entirely different, and the situation, the cognitions, the goals, ambitions, and aspirations are entirely different. So while a person who is of a middle class background, who is of a privileged class, might be open to the idea of psychoanalysis, talking-based therapy, a person who doesn't come from that cognitive tradition, who doesn't have those metacognitions that are associated with that culture and that community, might not have the same response and might not respond as well to therapy. So research has consistently shown us that psychotherapy in the way that it's seen today is not effective for incarcerated folks, is not effective in prison settings, and it's not effective in settings of high conflict areas. Like if you look at the Israel-Palestine issue, or if you look at most other issues, right, like the Syria-Iran issue, or if you look at Jammu and Kashmir, India, Pakistan, that entire scenario, most of these scenarios have been analyzed by psychotherapists and psychologists and psychiatrists, and most of the research points to the direction that it doesn't give us all the answers today because we don't have enough research to extrapolate it to different cultures and communities, look into their thoughts and aspirations. So to me, restorative justice is a marriage of the idea of law and justice, and the usage of law and justice, and the idea of individualism and individual psychology, alongside a very important third prong, that is the social and community-based aspects. Now, I don't know if everybody has read My Grandmother's Hands. If you haven't, I would suggest the book. It's beautifully written. The author in My Grandmother's Hands talks about this idea of intergenerational internalized trauma that needs to be metabolized by the body, and that happens in community settings, right? So the idea of restorative justice really focuses also, apart from the law psychology aspect, on the community's social aspects of healing, and recognizes that everybody has different narratives. None of these narratives are just false. A lot of these narratives are exactly what they seem to be. They're stories. They're stories we tell about ourselves. And stories are never true or false. They just are. But we do need to find ways as a society to reconcile these different stories, because we all tell different stories about ourselves and our communities. And that's what connects us back to our ancestry. And as human beings, we all need that story to hold on to, right? So the power of narrative building and storytelling on the psyche, and the same power of narrative building and storytelling on law enforcement is possible through the exploration of restorative justice, which is why I think it's such a powerful tool. And just to quickly conclude, I'd like to point out places where we have had restorative justice work and places that have succeeded with restorative justice work. We've had the South Africa Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which has done exceptional work. We've had Truth and Reconciliation Commissions in the Maori populated regions of New Zealand. We've had some Truth and Reconciliation Commissions also in Australia for Indigenous communities and the white populations over there. There has been one Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Norway, which reconciled differences with the Sami tribe in Norway. And all of these different commissions have been highly successful in doing three things, right? Firstly, they enabled an expression of the community narrative for each of the different communities that were involved, for each of the individual personalities that were involved, by inviting membership and by opening it out to as many people as possible. The second thing that they did was that they allowed for different people to engage with the other narrative. What this means is that they allowed for people to listen to someone else's story about a shared cultural past, about a shared heritage, and they allowed interactions and engagement. Because if somebody else has an opinion about my story, because it's also their story, it is important for me to understand where they're coming from so that I am able to reconcile what I feel about my own history with what they feel about their own history without it being denigrating or demeaning to anybody's sense of humanity. And the last reason why they succeeded is because they had proper neutral third party arbitrators or mediators to lead the process, and these people were highly trained and specialized, and they allowed for not just a mere superficial reconciliation or engagement, but they also allowed for constructive plans of action that integrated community spaces in a way that, again, that preserved the individual identity of these different communities, which I think is really important. What this means is that truth and reconciliation committees, truth and reconciliation forums are particularly useful when you're not trying to erase anybody's story, but when you're trying to understand people's stories, and when you're trying to support those stories and allow for the full expression of their cultural, political, social, and spiritual selves. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Well, thank you, Shreya. That was a feast of ideas. I'm just going to sort of ask the first question in the form of a comment, and then others can come in. You probably don't realise, because we've not had the chance to talk about it, but I set up my Institute of Peace Studies and Global Philosophy that you're now involved with, actually set up the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for Britain and Ireland. You didn't mention it because I don't think you knew it existed. I mean, I'm part Irish. I was involved behind the scenes with the Good Friday Agreement. I have many friends in Ireland and all over the British Isles. And we were set up in about 90, well, I mean, I was doing the work, peacemaking work in up till the Good Friday Agreement. But then afterwards, it was set up historically to like try and get the Catholic, Protestant, and other communities in Ireland to share their narratives, as you say. We had meetings in Dublin, Belfast, Holyhead, and more recently in Salisbury. Unfortunately, since that was set up, we've had Brexit, which has thrown the whole thing back into the firing line. And we've had violence break out again on the streets of Belfast and Ireland. I thought it was just a historic thing, you know, Tony Blair and everyone, we were proud, we made peace in Northern Ireland. But Brexit has thrown all that back into disarray. So I'm quite active. This is why I've been very active against Brexit. So that's just one thing to tell you, and I can share lots more information about that. I don't think the Ireland thing is, you know, is going to go away. It's still sadly part of the narrative. And then, having done that in Northern Ireland, I then went to the Middle East through various circumstances. I went to Israel and Palestine, and I interviewed people, and I launched the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for the Middle East, which again, you probably have never heard of. We've kept quite a low profile. We have some documentary footage, some films. I've issued reports. But the trouble with the Middle East is it's always flaring up again in different countries. So when you mention Lebanon, I mean, you know, it's a nightmare, isn't it? And Syria, the situation of Israel, Palestine, and that's just the start. You know, we could include Yemen and all the other conflicts, and Iraq. So yeah, so that also exists, the TRCME, which you haven't spoken about, which is really about restorative justice. And then more recently, with the World Intellectual Forum and the Institute, I've taken the step of setting up this thing, Iipsgp, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is about the International Commission for the Establishment of a Palestinian State. Because I've come to the conclusion, watching the latest round of fighting over Gaza, you know, truth and reconciliation only really works if both parties come to the table and want it. In the Middle East, there's a problem, and it's to do with human nature, arrogance, I don't know what, hubris and pain. the Israelis feel they have a monopoly of tragedy and pain, therefore they won't go and talk to the Palestinians. Seriously, there's no commitment there, apart from the peace movement in Israel, which is quite small. And under the Netanyahu government, no discourse about, peace is possible, really. It's just the military thing. So that's where Iipsgp has come from. Anyway, those are just things you probably, didn't realize were active. But thank you very much for your work. You're doing fantastic, contribution. And the questions you raised, yes, do you think, so that would be, one of my questions would be, can restorative justice do everything, or what do you do when one party won't come to the table? How do you have truth and reconciliation if somebody won't come to the meeting?
Thank you so much for informing me about the other aspects as well. I did know about the Israel-Palestine Commission that you had set up by virtue of the mail that you'd sent me. I just didn't want to take too much time explaining all of it, but it was so nice to hear you talk about your work, and I'd love to hear more about it whenever you have the time. And just coming to your question, here's what I think. I think that people don't sit at a table and discuss things because of a very deep-seated insecurity. In the case of Israel, that's because of all of the historical racialized trauma that's been inflicted on them and that has been passed on from generation to generation, right? Everybody at some level does want to live in a community that is peaceful, that is prosperous, that allows for growth, because I think in my belief system, I think that's fundamental to the humankind. So when somebody actively sabotages a community, or like a state in this case, actively sabotages efforts to reconcile, it's really because of a lack of trust and a lack of security. It seems to me that the ideology really is everyone's out to get me, which is fair for this community to think, given the historical past of where they've come from. So instead of forcing people to sit at a table, which is not in the spirit of Truth and Reconciliation Committee, we do need to think about how does the world, how does the global community, how does the other parties to this conflict help this community or this state or this individual deal with these feelings of mistrust and insecurity? How do we make ourselves seem trustworthy? I also feel like the issue really is that the world community, global leaders, different countries are always inconsistent. They change their stance all the time. It's very difficult to sit at a table with somebody who says one thing today and then says another thing 3 months later. Policies, if you look at US policy from the time that Trump was president to the time that Biden is president, it's barely been a few months into that presidency, policies have already changed. So in that scenario, with constant change and flux in policies, it's very difficult to trust. It's very difficult to get rid of that insecurity. So I think instead of looking at it as an uncooperative party or state or individual or community, we need to think about, are we being trustworthy? Are we being secure, safe for this community to let its guard down in our presence? And if we aren't doing enough, and I really think that the global community isn't, just given how constantly changing, ever changing these opinions and policies are, I don't see how long this state of insecurity will go on if people are just being consistent off the point. So that's what I would say. I would say really time for introspection into what are we doing wrong? Why isn't another party trusting us?
Right. Well, it's a big issue. Thank you for the point you raised. Very important. Anyone else got any questions for Shreya about this business? Birjan, go.
Who's going first? I think I have objection. It is not solely, of course, it has a part of it, a section of it, but it's not just who trusts in or just build up the trust, then everything will be okay. Because it is not if there isn't a will, it's not an intention to trust, to understand. If you want to trust someone, you look for the common ground to get along and then test about. But this is just the political invasion. It's just like, it is mine, I'm gonna take it. The others don't have rights. The mindset must change. The political approach must change. When we think trustworthy or they don't trust, that's true in general picture. But if one side always wants and invades and doesn't respect the rights and only plans and targets to take more and more, moreover, more importantly, there are 3 UN resolutions that state must be separated. So there isn't respect to international laws or treaties already out or resolutions. So I think we need to bring them on the table, or whatever we call, whether table or virtual or the agreement, to follow up the UN, because Israel is a part of the UN and UN formed for Israel, but not destroy the war or the Middle East all the time. So we must be clear on that. Okay. So we must claim the UN resolution should be in place, not and stop all the violence. Peace talk goes a little bit kind of showcase, but not real intention, at least one part, maybe 2 parts. So, when we have clear idea that the conflict and the invasion idea of intention stop, then we can talk about those, how we can remove the traumas and the conflicts and build up trust. So those will come once the intention are transparent and clear and honest, but those are not. That's to me, that's the main issues.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think that was a good. I noticed Sean, he had to leave, unfortunately, raising the issue of Colombia. He's going off to another meeting on Colombia. Again, I think there's a sort of truth and reconciliation process in Colombia. Do you know anything about that, Shreya? What's happening in Latin America?
I have been reading up a little bit about the different aspects of it, yes. But I would honestly love to know more from people who are experienced in that area. I do realize that it's highly volatile. I was just reading yesterday, day before yesterday, that the embassy in Nicaragua, the Argentinian and Bolivian embassy in Nicaragua, for example, withdrew their diplomatic envoys. I think that's what you would refer to them as, because if the policies, if the president there, Ortega, I think, and I have been hearing a lot about how Colombia, Argentina, Nicaragua, all of these countries have been in so much flux and change, which has been very, very deeply stressful.
And also COVID is hitting badly.
Yeah.
Like India.
Yeah. I think there was a protest just a few days back again against Bolsonaro, the president of Bolivia. Who kind of dismissed
Brazil.
The claims yeah. It has been it's been a highly volatile situation.
I read a report on a trusted source that it was revealed in Washington, some hearings in the Senate to do with American intelligence. Some guy from the CIA admitted that America installed Bolsonaro in Brazil to be the right-wing henchman, and that raises a huge problem. I mean, you're talking about trust between countries. How can that be possible if intelligence officers are interfering in other countries? And if British intelligence, I mean, we once tried to, well, we brought down a socialist in Iraq, Mossadegh. British intelligence worked with American intelligence. And personally, this is why I think all that kind of interference should be outlawed internationally. The UN should, you know, but even the UN's offices were being bugged by the CIA not long ago. We know that. So I mean, it's kind of like Wild West out there. Here we are, you know, the intellectuals, and yet meanwhile they're shooting up the village. So you know, the question is, as ever, how can the people of peace rally against the people of violence and stop the killing? You know, we can try Kacini's route and just count the number of bodies, but I'm not sure how we actually stop it. But anyway, thank you very much, Shreya, for those thoughts. Anyone else? Kacini,
Thank you so much.
for Shreya, do you have a question for her? Have you looked at, I mean, how do you deal with killings as in judicial killings? I mean, some countries have, I'm asking Kacini here, they have the death penalty. I noted that you said Russia has quite a lot of killings. What's going on in Russia? Well, are they shooting each other? I thought they were quite peaceful.
Actually, it's a combination of suicide and internal war, civilian war deaths.
So the death toll in Russia is quite high at the moment. Suicide.
Let me open the graph. I'll just for Colombia, I can say that the homicide rate is very high in Colombia.
Right. That's why Sean's gone off to deal with it. He's going to fires out.
Probably.
Yeah.
And for Russia, the problem is of suicide. The suicide is very high. The battle-related deaths are still less, but the suicide rate is quite high, which has made it come in the top 20 countries.
Right, thank you. That's very tragic. When I got involved with Philosophers of Peace back in the 1980s, we were set up by a man called Professor John Somerville, who was an American philosopher. He'd worked in Russia with Russian philosophers. And we called ourselves the International Association of Philosophers for the Prevention of Nuclear Omnicide. So suicide is the death of self. Omnicide is the death of all of us. You know, a nuclear war is omnicide. And that's, I'm still vice president. You know, we're trying to stop the collective suicide of the planet, if you want. Right, so look, I'm going to move on. I think what I'm going to do is share a few remarks of my own. I made a few notes. I want to bring people's mind to some of the issues the World Intellectual Forum are dealing with, right? We have these monthly meetings, but there are other things we're doing. Some of you know of some of them. And I think it looks at it in a slightly bigger picture, so it might be of interest. The World Intellectual Forum has, for instance, a project initiated by Professor Ian Fry from Australia and Marco Hren from Slovenia and myself to look at how we can reconceptualize spirituality, global spirituality. You know, religions as such have difficulty relating to each other, but if we try and reformulate what spirituality is in a more mature way, can we get a discourse going on between all the different regions and cultures and religions of the planet? And this is a project also to look at scientific developments. And I think as intellectuals, we have a duty to break down this war between science and spirituality, or science and religion. You know, the world is split into two camps. People thinking the answer to the problem is religion, other people thinking it's science. And that's come to a head with our pandemic. The world is having a sort of schizophrenic breakdown over this. Should we or shouldn't we take a vaccine? Who can we trust? Social media, etc. So anyway, our working group for the reconceptualization of global spirituality and science is going to be thinking through these issues. And anyone here is welcome to get involved, you know, spread the word. We heard from Kanu Mega a few times about, for instance, neuroscience is at the cutting edge of this, because neuroscience is actually now sophisticated enough to see what's going on in the brain. And hopefully she'll share a few more thoughts about this. When we're angry, upset, jealous, or altruistic and feeling benevolent or enlightened, there's a lot of work can be done in neuroscience. That's the sort of thing we need to work on. Connected to that work is the Interfaith Peace Treaty, which was in a project of my Institute of Peace Studies. It's the first time anyone's thought of this. One of my doctoral supervisors wrote a book called How Wars End. It's a good question, how do wars end? 9/10 they end with a peace treaty, which Shreya, as a lawyer, can tell us is like a legal document. A peace treaty is when two parties in a conflict sign a treaty and that's the end of the war, right? Well, okay, so in the war between religions, why not have a peace treaty, was the thinking. So back in 2015, I drafted, living in Scotland in the Castle of the Muses, the first ever interfaith peace treaty for humanity. I've given it to them as a present. And it's not just a bilateral one, not just say Muslims declaring war, peace with Christians or Jews. It's every single religious tradition is invited and welcome to sign up to this treaty. It has its own website. If you look in the chat and just type in interfaithpeacetreaty.com, the text comes up. It's been translated into about 5 or 6 languages. I haven't yet got it into Hindi, and I'd love it if someone who's a Hindi speaker from India could translate this text. It's in Japanese, Russian, German, Italian, Swedish, etc. But it'd be lovely to have it in Hindi because there's a lot of speakers of Hindi in the world, and I'd love a lot of them to sign the treaty. So anyone on this call or watching this later, please go to that website, sign the treaty, and then translate it into your language. I think it's a powerful tool, because how else are we going to get peace in the sphere of religions unless we sign a peace treaty? Okay, that's that thing. And then some of you also know another pedagogical tool that I came up with is the periodic table of the world's religious and philosophical traditions. My specialism, the Institute of Peace Studies and Global Philosophy, looks at how we can get peace between all the different ideologies, philosophies, and religions of the planet. So first of all, we need a map that demarcates them. We don't even have that. So I designed it based on Mendeleev's table of the elements, the periodic table of the elements. And it looks just like Mendeleev's table, only here we've got clusters of colors in boxes for different major traditions like humanism, Christianity, Judaism, Chinese religions, Hinduism, Islam, and so on. And they're all grouped in these different colors, like the periodic table of the religions. And this, I'm looking for a sample of it. I haven't got one to hand, but it's on my website. And what Sachin Raja and I are doing, Sachin is supposed to be joining us on this call if he gets up in time. It's 5:30 in Canada, in BC at the moment in the morning. He's getting printed these things as posters to have in every single classroom, in every school, just like the chemical periodic table of the elements is in all chemical labs and around the world. If you go to a university chemistry department or physics department, you see the periodic table. I want that when you go to any university humanities department, history, philosophy, or religious studies department, you'll see this table in 5 or 10 years from now. In every university and every school, okay? That will increase the literacy so that we can at least begin to talk about religious and philosophical literacy, because most people don't have a clue about the other's point of view. So those are connected to that project. The next thing to mention is okay, so Kacheni, you discussed the vaccine as a possible biological warfare operation in your conference yesterday. I mean, I wish I'd been able to be there. Tell us who was, I mean, was that a consensus of all the people there that it's an artificial thing, or was that a hypothesis?
Well, it was a hypothesis put forward by me, but no one raised any objection to it. So I believe it was agreed upon by everyone else.
Okay, right, thank you. So that's what we're going to be doing with the commission. So I've set up this thing. The acronym is ICI AOC, which stands for International Commission of Inquiry into the etiology of coronavirus. Now, etiology is a medical term meaning the origin of a disease, the cause of the disease. And, you know, we've had this thing for a year and a half, 3.8 million people have died of it, although some people contest those figures. And the etiology is still not known. You know, we don't know, was this actually a natural occurrence? Did it come through an animal chain into the human food consumption? Or was it originally an animal thing that was then augmented with what they call gain of function research? And there's a whole load of papers out there in the internet, and prestigious journals are now publishing on this. So I think as the World Intellectual Forum, straight the Institute, we thought we ought to set up a commission of inquiry and try and find out. Okay. And my job as chair of that is to suspend judgment. I don't have an absolute certainty either way. It could have been a biological engineering project. It could have been done in China at Wuhan. It could have been funded by American funds. We don't know. So that's the job of the commission. And I'm agnostic when it comes to the issues of vaccines and how best to treat this therapy. You know, we're not looking at that in the commission. That's a huge mile, you know, sort of football field of contending views. We're going to steer clear of all that, except insofar as some of those people might have views on the etiology. And, you know, I'll report back to each of our meetings on this, because this, if it is, I mean, I would say it's at least a 50% chance it is a bioengineered product, this virus, at least. And if that's true, then it is the most horrendous assault on our liberties and on our common sense, you know, let alone our lives, that I've lived through in my lifetime. I mean, watching the people dying in India and the burning bodies and all this is shocking. This Indian variant is now rampant in the UK. It's interfering with people's economy, with their, you know, mobility and all kinds of things. So if we don't speak up about this and try and investigate it, you know, what are we for? Anyway, so anyone that has any views on this or information about it, you know, put people in touch. If you come across things, discussions in your local media or the papers or the press, please send them our way, you know, and you've all got my email contact. It's quite important, this thing. I will just mention briefly, as I did mention before, the International Commission for the Establishment of a Palestinian State. We had a very heated meeting at the last meeting. We had our Israeli friend, Gila Haron, you know, who, as Shreya said, is typical in that she has inherited this sense of, oh, they're out to get me. And therefore, if you give an inch to the Palestinians, they're going to take a mile and bomb you, and they're going to want to push Israel into the sea. There's real fear in a lot of Israelis, you know, and so their aggression, what appears to outsiders as aggression towards the Palestinians, is actually coming from this fear. If you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. And I'm minded of the tragic killing of George Floyd by the white cop who had his knee on the guy's neck for, what was it, 10 minutes, and the guy died. Now, I imagine that cop was terrified that if he took his knee off, the guy would get up and stab him, you know. That's a defensive reaction because the guy's afraid. And so that's what they do. They use overwhelming force to pin the guy down so that he can't be a threat. And I think that's what Israel's doing. Israel has got her knee on the neck of the Palestinians and won't let go, daren't let go, because they're going to get angry back. There's this fear of retribution. But what I think we're saying with the ICEPs is that it's time to let the knee off, you know, and it's time to just try the peace route. Because, you know, if you keep the knee on there, it's horrendous what's going on. I mean, I interviewed people in Palestine who are lawyers working with Palestinian prisoners who are in jails. You know, the incarceration rates are very high. Young people are being brutalized and arrested and so on. So something's got to give. And I think what we can do is help establish a Palestinian state. I don't see any other way out of this mess. But to do it in such a way that even the most realistic Israeli, like Gila, she's typical Israeli, she served as a volunteer in they all have to serve time in the Israeli army, you know, et cetera, that even they will realize this is probably the best way forward. And my vision is that a Palestinian state would, once it achieves independence, would sign a peace treaty with Israel. It'd be a non-violent relationship. And perhaps eventually in time, once trust builds, they might create a sort of a confederation of the two states. Who knows? That's further down the line. But anyone that feels strongly about that issue, yeah, please get in touch. And then I want to just mention briefly the Putin-Biden summit that took place in Geneva. I think this is really a good bit of news to share. And I noted in the press conference that Putin gave us afterwards, he mentioned again this question of the cyber peace treaty. Putin was saying, yes, we Russians, we talk to Biden, you know, he's a more intelligent guy than Trump. We can actually talk to the bloke, although he's very diplomatic, he wouldn't say it like that. And we discussed this issue of cyber warfare. And Putin revealed something very interesting. He said the following, because you all know the stories that, you know, Russia has all these hackers that are attacking America all the time. And he shared the following. He said that Russia had only received 2 complaints from America about possible hackings that had happened. On 2 occasions, the American authorities officially notified Russia. It appeared that somebody based in Russia had hacked into American computer structures and caused some damage. And they wanted an explanation. Was this authorized by the Russian government? Was it sort of criminals? Who did this? Twice. And they provided the evidence. And Putin said, we're helping them. We're going with the, you know, we're going to find out who did this. No, it wasn't us. It wasn't the government, he said. And then he said the following. He said, and we in return gave the Americans 45 examples of attempts at hacking our critical infrastructure on the internet, which seemed to come from America. 45 instances. We presented this to the American authorities, and we have yet to receive a reply about any of them. Okay, so Putin was saying, look, this isn't fair. You know, they complain we did it twice, we're helping them. We know that 45 times Americans attacked us and they won't even talk about it. So, like I say, it's a wild west. There's no sense of order here. And I think the only way to get that would be to have an actual treaty signed. That's how we're slowly beginning to get across the idea that nuclear weapons are illegal. And this new treaty that's declared nuclear weapons illegal, that's slowly going to filter through. We need to make the cowboys come out of the woods and stop firing off their internet salvos at each other. Anyway, that was another thing that came out of the Putin-Biden summit, and I think that will happen. And we in the World Intellectual Forum, we can help push on that issue. That's why I raised it with Sean for the IPB. Okay, and then we also have another project we're involved with, in case you're not aware of it, which is the the question of the Delphic Games. Now, some of you have heard of this project. A man called Christian Kirsch addressed our meeting last month. He lives in Berlin. He runs the World Delphic Games as a revival. Now, in the classical world, there were the Olympic Games, which did sports. And then there were the Delphic Games, which did culture and the arts. And we're trying to revive the Delphic Games. And so what would happen every 4 years, contestants would come to Delphi or some other selected capital, it could be Delhi or wherever, and they would perform in 6 different art clusters. So one is the visual arts, so that's like painting, but also film, photography and all that. One is music, the musical arts, so all genres, world music, folk music, classical music, pop music, the whole thing. Another is, well, this is a new category, the ecological arts. So this is things like landscape gardening, ecological sustainable development projects. Another is social and communication arts, and that includes philosophy, intellectual work, dialectic. There'd be debating competitions, this kind of thing. And then there's literature, the written arts, and poetry. And then there's a category for dance as well. Anyway, the potential is enormous here. And if we can get the world getting excited about the Delphic Games as much as it does with the Olympic Games, you know, we'll be on path to rehumanize humanity and take the wild edge off us. So if anyone here is into the arts or has an interest in that route to peace, you know, the Delphic Games is the thing for you, and it's run by a colleague of ours, Christian Kirsch. I'm on his board of advisors, if you want. Anyway, that's exciting. Okay, I think that's enough from me. I've given you a run through of some of the projects we're doing. Any questions to any of what I've said, and then we'll go on to our next speaker. Anyone, any comments about any of that? Kanu, are you still with us? Do you want to comment on the science spirituality link?
Yes, Professor Thomas, I'm here. And yes, it's very difficult to, I mean, what I can say, the correlate science and spirituality. There are a lot of gaps which need to be filled. But yes, definitely, as Shreya discussed, the psychotherapy is still not able to understand in the criminal settings and many other, like the terrorism and other these issues. So yeah, it's difficult, but I would definitely say that to understand brain and its functioning and how it functions during the conflicting times when you are in the conflicting situation, highly problematic situation. So how it works. So one needs to understand their own physiology and functioning of the brain. So it really helps in resolving the situation, as I discussed last time. I remember last month. So between the there are various parts of the brain which have dilemma between each other during the conflicting situation. So there are some regions which are associated with the logical thinking, and at the same time there is a region which is associated with the emotional thinking. So during the conflicting situation, the regions of the brain which are playing the role in the logical thinking are taken over, the function they're taken over by the emotional part of the brain. So because of that, we tend to involved in some problematic situation or some criminal acts or any kind of violence situation. So I would definitely say that understanding one's brain is definitely it will help in resolving the conflict situation to some extent.
Right. Well, thank you. Yes. And I think, you know, we must work on a paper on this. This is important.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so look, I think let's move on. Let's hear from Bircan from Turkey. I think she's in Istanbul. Tell us a bit more about your work at the UN and how you see the state of the world. Are we heading in the right direction? Just to be controversial, is there a Truth and Reconciliation Commission happening in Turkey with the Kurds? I mean, is that a possible frontier for you know, peace building and restorative justice. Do you know of any work going on there? But anyway, the floor is yours, Birjan.
Okay, now we have Ezan. So you might, I hear strong Ezan. We have mosque and it's so loud and it's like in the house. So I'm trying to focus. Pray, you know, call for prayer.
Yes. Well, we'll
So,
finish with the
okay.
tell them not to worry. Yeah.
Okay, I formed the Light Millennium Organization 2001. Initially introduced it over the web, and it was and it has been initially the need to connect people through ideas, as actually you do different level, different discipline through different disciplines, academicians. Mine was really more humble level in two-folded. One is really encourage people. I really trust in people. So this is my vision and trust. One of our speakers also spoke about trust. I really believe in everyone has some potential, whether it's writing, arts, music, singing, creativity, within the abstract term of expression. But most of us, I mean, in any part of the world, if you consider, as you also brought out very right, that, for instance, peace is supposed to be mass movement, right? But it's like minority. It's like intellectual, it's like minority. If you are thinker, writer, singer, author, or you have an interest or little education or little production, and then either you are excluded or you are categorized in the elite category. So I object in those categorization, but I thought if this platform should bring individuals, of course, with the limitation, the language, Turkish and English, I started with, and not like the only academician, only professors, only artists, only who already prove, but provide a potential to bring both peers, masters, 10 years old, encourage them, and some may have long experience observation, but may not have courage to share, to write, to take photos or draw. So these were the kind of initial thoughts to invest in, encourage in human potential, and to bring out as a global connector to understand each other, us, through our ideas, visions, artwork, expression, and it should have some solution, not complain about, we don't want, I mean, I'm not promoting, this is a platform, you can share any drama. Of course, everything has some part of drama or tragedy, but how we can evolve, transform that based on whether on the personal or organization or politics, etc. How we develop an idea that will bring in positive approach, a light, a hope, that will be whatever that expression idea is present. So we've done, I think still is unique, but when we came up this idea and we promoted, and how really, I still don't know today, Dr. Gandhi identified me and many others with different parts of the world, and in Sri Lanka, Canada, and even Armenia, that's whole another issue. So the work really reached out, but it's very, symbolic level, not like magnitude. But then once this, before social media, really, we really kind of made, like we had like thousands contributors, and all free, no funded, and rely on my labor. And I mostly covered all the website maintenance, and we received donations really based on actual events, let's say receptions, booklets, that kind of just, and in kind. So still it is a volunteer-based organization. But what had changed was two things. One is our association with the UN, that's part of your question. I always had the peace idea. My one of the first video project, 1992, was peace, reality, or utopian dream. The question hasn't changed. The question has replied followed by any parties in the world. Still, is it a dream or utopia, right? So this was my first project when actually I was also first step in the United Nations, searching that it's photo library, and they were so open, welcoming, because also I was studying master degree and in media. So that really inspired me to more involved with the UN work. And then when I was graduating, my final thesis project was freedom of all ideas, freedom of expression in Turkey. That actually a combination of those, and also my another aspect is I am independent public access TV producer at Queen's Public TV since 90. I received my certificate in 1991, and I've been producing since 1992 as an independent producer. And those I also channel to Light Millennium. This is important because, for instance, Turkey doesn't have public access. And I suppose India doesn't have either. I have some idea, but not so specifically. BBC might have some section of it in terms of public benefit media, non-commercial, that the policy cities provides the equipment, and then citizens train and use both production and also being able to produce and broadcast those. So I produce over 150 programs literally by labor, time, dedication, and no fun, and except, you know, covering costs myself, the crew per semester. Anyhow, so but the reason QPTV came in, my experience with QPTV, and also my study and UN first experience was very positive. Those led me to come up the Light Millennium concept. And then therefore, and I had an idea before I officially formed that I will enter this organization to the UN. And when we met the criteria, because it was requiring 3 years, we have to have 501c3. And when we associated with the UN, and then this, and also along with when social media break out, then most people just, you know, as of today, everyone likes to show their pictures, selfies, and families, and holidays, and dinners, and parties, but not the idea still. Twitter is taking up the idea I came up 1999. They want to produce and encourage people for original ideas. It's not out yet, but they are talking about it. So these were really those two things. And once I couldn't, how do you say, challenge with social media. So, and also we kind of lose contributors and volunteers. It's because everyone kind of channeled their energy or interest to social media. It's more kind of more popular, or technologically, IT technology is of course much more advanced than what we would have produced. But then with the UN, and I realized even my own local community in New York, and whom I connected work with, including academic universities, the major in New York, they are really not aware what has been happening at the UN. That's supposed to be their major area. They need to connect it and bridge and search and to present and make as part of their research. So I've seen there is a really big gap, both with the real local communities and with the academic area. So I kind of focus more related our projects, events in connection with the UN. What made it difference is really whatever we are coming up with, and look at 158 UN days, and it's increasing. And 17 as of today UN SDGs. We have Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Any ideas any of you might have, you may really go through, pick one. What especially Thomas, you have tons of ideas, all kind of aligns with the UN. And then you specify with that resolution and then little bit tailoring and promote and present with the UN with that particular day and or SDGs, etc. So then you become a bridge, you aware people or disseminate UN program while actually you are also disseminating, producing your own ideas in collaboration with others.
No, it's important. Can I just add something, because we're coming up to the end of our time. We've only got a few minutes. At the meeting in Delhi, the last, one of Dr. Gandhi's meetings, and when the World Intellectual Forum met, we actually issued a declaration. I was asked to write up the declaration.
Yes.
And what we did was we listed all the UN Sustainable Development Goals, but then we added a spiritual column. So we said, what can the religions, what can spirituality, what light can it shed on?
It was an epic one. I really like it, the way you put it up.
So what you could do is you could print that out and stick it all over the UN, put it on the wooden wall outside the security chamber.
No, it doesn't work that way. I have actually 2 points. I was coming to that. One is maybe, this is slightly different though, but we're gonna have an event because I'm also chair of the Turkish American Association, Assembly of Turkish American Associations, UN committee chair. So I am developing program as I'm describing for my organization. I am in whomever I'm involved with. So I'm kind of applying the same approach. So we pick September 15 is the International Day of Democracy. So we already decide September 12, Sunday, 12:30, and we will have 3-4 speakers, including myself. And we will speak International Day of Democracy. One of the speakers will speak especially democracy of the US. He's author and he has book on it. So I will, if you like, I could get exact title.
Send details, that'd be good. And I'll circulate them to our groups.
So maybe I'm just thinking, because we will discuss with you through email separately. And if once the context is not out there, the outline, and then if I was listening to you, I was thinking maybe you might be good to bring different perspective in that context. So another thing is, when you say about this, the declaration, maybe let's share the UN SDGs and UN days, and let's go through, for instance, okay, I have an idea. For instance, International Day of Non-Violence, Gandhi's birthday. We may organize a joint event, including Gandhi, including declaration, and your institute, Anuvrat, Shantifan in New York, and Light Millennium, and then you can present it as part of your presentation, and everyone can bring Gandhi's ideas. So then that also allow me to present to the UN, and I will request it to be place our related announcement in the UNDGC's weekly announcement. So these are the ways to go more effective, and because when you distribute, you won't know how many people really will click it. But when you announce an event, present it, and then also share its outcome or video, so it becomes multiple layers. In your question, I have to touch on, because I know you bring out in different summaries or philosophical discussion. I didn't get into, because it's a little bit so, to me, the completely different issue, the way you take up or maybe have perception, the way I consider. Kurdish issue is not Kurdish people's right. Kurdish issue is an international plan project, really to realize, to reactivate the Treaty of Sèvres 1920, which Atatürk torn apart. So this has been a global agenda, and Kurdish, not Kurdish people, the PKK and another branches of PKK has been supported by 20 countries, and US is the one most providing the highest level of weapons. If really they care people, they would invest in people, developing people. So they choose people, and then they educate them in the US, the Harvard, all provide everything. They kind of, if they are able to split Turkey, if they form a separate country, and then they're gonna be puppet, and because they're gonna be educated, raised, and transported over the decades. So this is not the independence. This is not the right. I mean, as you said, I fully agree and support, especially Western countries, of course, China and Russia and any powerful country and Germany, etc. They must pull their hands, intervene in other countries, especially keeping the conflicts. Now we don't have big wars, but we have polarized, split up internal conflicts. So they still only sell weapons or biological weapon. Now it's in the nuclear kind of a little bit pushed out from the agenda, but nuclear, I mean, biological weapon, and conflicts are, you know, like mushrooming. So we focus so much the big wars, but then we have more internal civil war, regional war, continuing sustain wars, not sustain peace. This is the problem.
Sure.
So we have to look at that in that angle.
Okay.
Because the Kurdish issue is not a pure human rights issue.
Sure. No, thank you very much. Maybe that's a good note to end on. That could be a theme for next month's meeting. I mean, you should know that on the board of the World Intellectual Forum are several people that want to reform the UN and make it more a house of peoples. The UN is a house of nations at the moment.
But it's up to you. I mean, it's up to us, since I am on the board of the World Intellectual Forum, and I propose to you that I am willing to help to be your guide, to associate. And what you are doing remarkables, and the group of interesting academicians and world of mind, bright minds. So, but the idea is really to bring these discussions, being as an associated NGO at the UN, and even let's say if this is public and announce it, and then we would reflect that. But once it is not associated, then this is the kind of how this is a privilege being associated. So you can reflect them, you can request them to be included in the weekly news letter, weekly announcement. Also, this year may not, maybe might be virtual, but 2022 it's going to be, this is the perception, at least, or projection, to have a major international, the UN Civil Society Conference. You know, Anurag takes it very seriously, and they and I do too. We organize workshops and all that. Maybe in collaboration and or just solo, and because you still have to have other organization along with. So
Okay.
that could be another channel to present World Intellectual Forum during one of the upcoming UN NGO conference. Therefore, association will be the key.
Thank you for that. We'll continue that conversation, you know, by email and so on. I just want to say that we need to draw the meeting to an end. We've used up our time. Thank you to everyone that spoke. One last word, Kacheni, just final thought to finish. I hope you've enjoyed this session, and thank you for your kind words, and good luck with the work you're doing. Any final thoughts you'd like to say?
Well, it was very nice listening to all of you here, especially to Birkan ma'am. And we'll explored a lot many different angles as well. As you also asked about the question that post-traumatic, all those things. So I can share with you the work which has been done in the field of non-killing. So you can come across all those things which are related to non-violence, non-killing. So I will be sharing that with the forum, and you can go through it. So there is a lot done actually in the field, and hopefully we keep meeting like this, and probably a more of a discussion would help us in moving forward. That's it.
Thank you, Cheney, very much. Thank you. Shreya, any last thoughts? You've listened, and thank you for your contribution as well.
I really enjoyed today. I really enjoyed listening to everyone. Very interesting thoughts and ideas. I think just the power of words have the capacity to change a lot for humanity and for the planet. So I'm really glad that we're able to do this. Thank you.
A good thing. Okay, thank you. Kanu, your last thoughts from you. You've not been.
Yeah.
Been
Yes, today, so no, Professor Thomas, I couldn't speak today. So yeah, I would like to say thanks to Birkhan ma'am and Shreya and Katyani for sharing your thoughts. I mean, it was lovely to listen to Shreya. I mean, she shared so many, different incidences, and even the Katyani from her yesterday's conference. So I would love to know more about, as she discussed, from the non-violence and non-killing, because even I'm also interested in, contributing to these issues. So yeah, thank you everyone.
right. Thank you. Okay, and Birjan as well. Thank you again for your contributions. And
Thank you to all. Maybe if I may, LM Global, I'll just share here. If any of you, maybe
put your website into the.
I just put it. This is new interface of the late millennium. For instance, Thomas, your summaries are so extensive. It's really each of them as academic study, and each of them just reading through is really serious work. So what I mean is, for instance, you wanna make people, general people, understand interest to join. Therefore, any of you, like 2, 3 page, 5 pages, if you are agreed publishing policy, or just for instance, if the World Intellectual Forum or any of your organization, that could be organization level collaboration, because we don't publish any advertisement, we don't sell, and we don't get any, just we make it available globally and promote it. So that also allows me to share through my channels. So please welcome any of you like to share. That is more like easy read, and but also enlighten and engage, encourage others to understand what you are doing.
Okay, thank you. I want to just end with a very short reading. I'm doing a commentary on the Quran. Some of you know this.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Okay, so I've been.
That's a challenge to me a lot.
Listen. So I've been working on a line-by-line commentary on the Quran. I figure there's 1.4 billion Muslims in the world, and the Quran is actually an amazing peace document. If you actually read it properly and study it, as I've done.
I haven't.
It is a peace document. Listen to my commentary. And I want to end, I'm working on Surah 51 at the moment. And there's a wonderful verse in there. Two verses, 56 and 55. 55 says, but teach, for teaching benefits the believers. Now this is, the Quran is a document for all educators. I've taught at universities all over the world, Oxford, London. I taught at the Muslim College. My vision for the World Intellectual Forum is that we should get universities to join and support. We should get sixth form colleges, because, and also the international academic associations, professors who are linked. So that's our mission field for the World Intellectual Forum, is education. And we have it here in the Holy Book. Teach, for teaching benefits the believers. And by the believers, I include all of us, people that have faith, that believe in life, that believe in peace. Islam means simply peace. So I just wanted to end with that quote, and it is that verse 51. Okay, so let's keep going. All of you are educators in your own way, and tell people that the World Intellectual Forum is open for business in the business of planetary salvation through education. Absolutely simple and straightforward. And just to say, I'm also reading this book, by Hassan Abbas. I don't know if you can see this book. It's a life of the Prophet's heir called Ali, who was married to his daughter, Fatima. And Ali helped write down the Quran. The Prophet received it as an inspired word, but Ali was literate and he would write it down. And it says in this book, which first ever biography of Ali in English by an academic. He's a professor at in America of international relations, who spent 10 years researching this book. And Ali knew what the Quran meant. He could comment on it. And he said once, he said, I could do a commentary on the first chapter of the Quran, and it would fill 70 camels with 70 camels will be burdened down with his commentary. And that's just one verse, one surah. My commentary is about 10 volumes so far, so it would fill about 70 camels when it's published. But anyway, and poor old Ali, he was killed, he was martyred by the people that wanted Islam to become like a war business, the military warlords of his day, who were just the old Arab fighting people who didn't change their way. They became Muslim only on paper. They carried on with their war business. A bit like, you know, British military elites that carry on with their fighting. They just pretend to be Christians. They're fake Christians. So that's what we're up against. How do we actually get the true wisdom of peace through these different traditions, be it Islam or Christianity or Hinduism or whatever? Anyway, I'll leave you with those thoughts, and do read this book, Hassan Abbas. It absolutely is mind-boggling.
If you write any, I'm not saying comment, but just a little bit, how do you say, book review, I'd be happy to post it, but I'm not in the stage to dive in those fields because just
Well,
to
anyway,
be honest.
give my love to Istanbul and say hello to the Imams. They should listen to my commentary on the Quran.
I mean, I don't know any imam.
No. Well,
I'm secular.
I think there's a couple near you. We heard the call to prayer earlier, so. Right, okay, let's just have 1 minute silence to finish, and then I'll close the meeting. Just 1 minute inner reflection. Right, shalom, salam, peace.
Peace, salam, marhaba, peace to the world.
Peace.